Hello, everyone, and welcome to my defining moments in my history of my family and I. Right from the beginning, I lived my whole life in Singapore, a small, beautiful country in Southeast Asia. It has amazing, beautiful tourist attractions like the Marina Bay Sands, a hotel in the shape of a ship, the Merlion statue, a mythical animal that represents Singapore, Gardens by the Bay, a big garden full of animals and plants, and so on. Now, on July 1st, 2008, Max Jacob was born in Gleneagles Hospital of Singapore. Apparently, I was supposed to be born on June 30th, but I guess I was too lazy to be born earlier. This is where I spent most of my life, an apartment building set in a small area called Holland Village. It was a beautiful scenic area with a lot of countless places like a shopping center, a food court, a piazza, and more. Sometimes, I miss living here. For my parents though, they were born in the Philippines, with my father living in a region called Bicol and my mother living in Kalibo, set in Aklan. They both went to the same school, University of Santo Tomas. They both had the same interest in architecture and pursued their dream at the CA Ventura office. In 1999, they eventually crossed paths and fell in love. Was it a coincidence that they both went to the same school and office? I think not. Now, why did we move to Canada? Well, my father managed to get the opportunity to study and eventually work at the Integrated Project Services, or the IPS. He left for Canada at the start of January 2022. My mother, brother, and I, however, we weren't able to move to Canada with him. My father needed time to settle and secure his job before we followed him afterwards. If we did go with him, we all could have been stressed out finding a place to stay and constantly move around before my father could even secure his job. Fortunately, we're gonna fly in the summer. Unfortunately, we had a pandemic, which caused tons of backlogs for us to travel, even when summer struck. For a while, it was just my mother, brother, and I. Constantly, we moved from place to place. Ever since we sold our home, we had nowhere to stay. We stayed in hotels and even bunked in with friends. It was tough. Eventually, we traveled to our home country as we figured we had a home there to stay and finally relax. As months flew by and documents being settled for our travel, we finally arrived in Toronto in late January 2023. Moving on, further down my family tree are my mother's grandparents. Sadly, I had very little information about them, but they were most likely born around the end of World War I and managed to witness an invasion of the Japanese. My mother claimed that they managed to meet the soldiers but were unharmed. On to my parents. Their lives were quite simple. Them and kids their age would always go outside to do everything. Hang out, play, or even a nice relaxing stroll in their free time. There's kids out there that still do the same thing. However, we obtained innovative technology, like phones, computers, and so on, that we would use for work and even for entertainment in our free time. Life back then was completely different compared to now. Speaking of life today, COVID also changed how we live in our society. We were restricted from going out freely due to the fear of getting the virus, and we did everything at home, even work. Things cooled down over the years, but my family and I were trying to be cautious by washing our hands, wearing masks at all times, and avoid large crowds. For my parents, however, they were probably affected by the major events that was happening outside of the Philippines, like the Cold War, 9/11, the Iraq War, and so on. Finally, ending on a good note, here are small facts about my family. My father has 2 brothers, and he's the oldest out of all of them. For a while, they formed a band together and even performed up on stage in front of a large audience way back then. My dad's brother in the middle had a band on his own too, which you can find on streaming platforms. And for my mother, well, her grandfather is actually from Xiamen, a place where most Filipino Chinese originated from, while her grandmother was Filipino. So we technically have Chinese blood in us. As she grew up, she lived in an ancient stone house called Bahay na Bato, a building that originated from the Spanish colonial period, which was around the 1500s. The end, and thanks for everyone for listening.